Before we start the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. It helps us create quality content for you. Help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. Enjoy.
Cadet Leon Vance stood rigid in the center of the orbital drop hangar, his Earth-standard boots clicking against the pristine deck plating. He was flanked by towering banners of the Galactic Joint Military Academy, all emblazoned with the crests of noble houses and warrior clans from across 1,000 star systems. His own uniform bore no such embellishments, just the stark regulation black of a provisional cadet from Earth, with a single silver bar on the collar. Around him, non-human cadets milled in small groups, exchanging hushed remarks in voices filled with equal parts curiosity and contempt. Leon caught snippets in trade tongue, primitive deathworlder, emotional liability, barely civilized. He ignored them. He'd heard worse back home. A heavy footfall approached from behind. Without turning, Leon already knew the gait, precise, deliberate, with just enough weight in each step to assert dominance. Commander Threxon stopped beside him, arms crossed, behind his back. The Vocari officer's red-scaled face was unreadable, but his voice held icy disdain. Cadet Vance, you understand the parameters of this final simulation? Leon nodded once. Yes, sir. You are to command Squad 9 in defensive operations against a superior force. Your objective is to hold base Theta until reinforcements arrive or until ordered to surrender. Your team comprises mixed-species cadets. Their cooperation is conditional. Threxon's eyes narrowed. Do not embarrass yourself, or us. Leon kept his jaw clenched. Understood, sir. Threxon gestured, and the holographic deployment map blinked to life in front of them. Red and blue icons flared into existence over a mountainous terrain with narrow passes and ridgelines. Base Theta is here. You'll drop in with minimal supplies and limited drone support. Enemy cadets led by Delcari Cadet Koljun will engage with full offensive protocols. You will not win. That last line lingered. Your setting? Just up to lose, Leon said quietly. This is a lesson, not a victory march, Threxon replied, voice cool. Know your limits, cadet, and know when to surrender. Leon glanced at the map again. With respect, sir, I never learned how. Threxon's stare remained level, but his silence was heavy. Then, with a flick of his clawed hand, the map vanished. You have your orders. When the drop pod slammed into the dust-choked ravine near base Theta, Leon was already moving before the hydraulic seals fully disengaged. He emerged into dry, thin air laced with the scent of iron-rich rock and ozone. The sun overhead was pale, yellow, filtered through the thin atmosphere of the training moon designated Gale Terra 17. Waiting for him outside the pod was a group of 6 cadets, each visibly unimpressed. Towering among them was Brack, an Ursari male easily twice Leon's mass covered in coarse dark fur. His arms were folded across his chest, and his small black eyes glinted with skepticism. So, Brack grunted. You're the Deathworlder, Leon gave a curt nod. Leon Vance, acting commander of Squad 9. A chittering click came from his left. A wiry insectoid Quarnian cadet tapped his forelegs impatiently. We were told you'd be more imposing or unstable, Leon surveyed the assembled unit. A Drevi sniper, 2 Parnassi techs, 1 silent reptilian Akari, and Brack. No cohesion, no hierarchy. Just 7 strangers thrown into a failing simulation. Let's get this straight, Leon said. I don't care what species you are. I don't care if you think I'm inferior. We're stuck in a canyon base with minimal resources, no air, support, and an enemy who thinks this'll be over before supper. That's a problem for them, not for us. Brack raised an eyebrow. You plan to win? Leon didn't blink. I plan to make them regret showing up. They hiked the last half-kilometer to base Theta. It was more bunker than base, a reinforced dome wedged between 2 cliffs with a broken perimeter fence and only 1 functioning turret. The techs immediately began assessing systems. Leon climbed the ridge to get a full view of the terrain. It was worse than the map suggested. The narrow pass leading to the base was exposed, but a series of ravines and dry gullies offered multiple flanking routes. Perfect for an ambush, even more perfect for getting overwhelmed. Back inside, the Drevi sniper, Callan, pulled up an intercepted signal. "They're coming fast," Callan said. "Delcari formations, standard blitz pattern, ETA 20 minutes. Leon turned to his squad. "We've got two choices. We sit in here like good little cadets and get rolled over, or we make them chase shadows until they're begging for the test to end. Anyone here ever tried Earth tactics?" Blank stares. Brack scratched his jaw. "Then today's your first lesson in asymmetry." They moved fast. Leon split the team into two-man units and sent them out with orders to lay motion-triggered shock mines using spare drone cores. He showed Brack how to rig noise traps out of scrap alloy and set them near ravines to create phantom footfalls. The Parnassi cadets hacked into the comm relays and bounced false coordinates across the terrain grid. Callan watched him work with a tilted head. "This isn't regulation. Neither is survival," Leon replied. By the time the enemy crested, the first ridge, Squad 9, had vanished from base Theta entirely. Only a single drone, looping a pre-recorded patrol pattern, remained visible. Koljun's units hit the front gate hard, only to find it mined and empty. When they split up to search the ravines, Leon's traps went off, flashes of electric, bursts and shrieking alarms that echoed off the cliffs. Every echo suggested movement. Every movement drew a Delcari squad away from the main force. From a perch high above the western approach, Leon watched through binoculars as Koljun's formation fractured into scattered cells. Their cohesion, so prized by Delcari training, doctrine, crumbled in under an hour. "We don't have the firepower to finish them," Callan said through the earpiece. "Even scattered, they'll regroup." Leon tapped his comm. "We're not here to finish them. We're here to make them doubt. Fear is the weapon." That night, they hit a forward supply cache with stun charges and electromagnetic scramblers. The Parnassi techs laughed in disbelief as they retrieved fully intact crates of ammunition and ration packs. Brack carried 3 crates on one shoulder, grinning as he dropped them by the base wall. "You're crazier than the stories said," the Osari cadet muttered. Leon sat on a rock, wiping grime from his face. "I say that like it's a bad thing. They didn't sleep much." The next day, Koljun launched another offensive, this time sending half his units around the back trails. Leon had anticipated that. He'd already moved Squad 9 to high ground, where they could pelt the flanking units with targeted shock blasts and comm jammers. It wasn't elegant, but it worked. By the third day, Squad 9 had still not surrendered. The simulation was already outside expected duration. Commander Threxon stood in the Academy's observation chamber, arms folded, watching the data scroll across the tactical display. He should have surrendered 42 hours ago. The assistant beside him said nothing. Threxon's eye ridges twitched. He is not supposed to adapt this well. This is not doctrine. Back on the training moon, Leon stood beside Brack on the ridge as the morning sun broke over the jagged cliffs. Below, smoke curled from the charred remnants of another failed enemy push. Brack tilted his head. "They'll escalate. Try to corner us." "They'll try," Leon said. He pulled a scrap of paper from his jacket pocket and unrolled it. A hand-drawn map, stained and crinkled. On it, he'd marked Koljun's supply route, relay station, and base location. "I think it's time we stopped playing defense." Brack blinked. "You want to go after them?" Leon folded the map. "You saw what they did when they thought we were weak. Imagine what happens when we prove otherwise. Threxon will order surrender." Leon looked down the ridge. He already did. A silence passed between them. The wind stirred red dust into the air. Then Brack chuckled, deep and rumbling. "You're insane, I like it." Leon adjusted the strap on his rifle and started back toward the others. "Let's go rewrite the rules." The air above the canyon shimmered with heat and static as midday light bled down over the jagged terrain. Leon Vance crouched behind a thicket of scorched, wiry brush, the scope of his rifle pressed to his eye. A Delcari patrol trudged through. The lower ravine 8 strong, their uniforms streaked with dust and their expressions impatient. "They're stretching thin," Brack murmured beside him. The big Ursari's voice was low but steady, his heavy frame barely concealed by the rocks. Leon adjusted the sight. "They're tired, irritated. They still think we're scattered." "They're not wrong," Leon smiled faintly. "No, but they're not right either." Below, the lead Delcari cadet paused, ears flicking at a distant clicking noise to his right. He raised a clenched fist to halt the patrol, just as the pressure-sensitive trap snapped. A sudden whoomph echoed across the ravine as the concussive mine erupted in a flash of non-lethal light and sound. The Delcari were thrown backward, in a disoriented tangle. From the far side, Callan opened fire with stun rounds, each shot calculated to sow confusion, not casualties. Leon and Brack moved fast, flanking from above. By the time the patrol regrouped, half their comms were fried, and 2 members had vanished into the dust, bound and stunned. Leon gave a short signal, and the remaining Delcari stumbled away into the canyon, dragging their wounded, too dazed to notice the satchel of supplies left behind. Back at the fallback site, an abandoned irrigation cistern reinforced with scavenged plating, the squad huddled around the hall. Ration packs, pulse cartridges, and most importantly, a working tactical uplink. The Parnassi techs began rewiring it immediately, chirping in their own dialect as they configured a spoofed signal node. Brack tossed a water pouch to Leon. "You know, the other squads probably spent this week learning how to call for surrender protocols and calibrate energy shields." Leon twisted the cap open, drinking slowly. "That's the difference between training for order and training for war." Across the room, the younger of the Parnassi, a wiry, bright-eyed cadet named Etho, looked up from the transmitter. "You do realize we're technically breaking 5 regulations with this maneuver." Leon didn't glance over. "Only 5. We'll try harder next time." Etho laughed and ducked back down. The stolen uplink gave them access to enemy squad traffic. For the next 6 hours, Leon listened, mapped and strategized. He marked each Delcari call sign, tracked their supply rotations, and timed their patrols. The more he heard, the clearer the picture became. Koljun's units were unraveling. Not from losses, but from frustration. This wasn't the clean, decisive simulation they'd trained for. The human was playing by rules they didn't understand. "You hear that?" Callan asked that evening, perched on a ledge above the cistern. Leon looked up. "What?" Silence. "They're not probing tonight. No drones, no scouts." "They're regrouping," Leon said, "trying to decide if they're hunting cadets or ghosts." Brack pulled a tarp over the entry hatch and settled into his makeshift bedding. "Either way, they're scared." Leon lay awake long after the others had drifted off, staring up at the cracked ceiling. He thought of his father, an ex-Marine turned survivalist who'd once told him that war wasn't about strength or tactics or even luck. It was about pressure. Pressure breaks men, builds monsters, and sometimes, it forges something better. At dawn, the enemy made a mistake. A Delcari officer, likely trying to reassert control, broadcast a rally order across all open comm channels. It was meant to intimidate. Instead, it handed Leon a precise location and time for the next consolidation point. He didn't hesitate. An hour later, Squad 9 set out. They moved low and silent across the ravines, covering themselves in dust and thermal scramble cloaks. Etho carried a pulse scrambler slung across his back. Brack shouldered a collapsible shield he'd welded together himself. Callan scouted. Ahead, eyes sharp through his scope, at the edge of a dry wash, they paused. Across the clearing, a cluster of Delcari cadets set up a mobile comm relay beneath a camouflage net. Koljun wasn't there, but his lieutenants were. Dozens of them. Leon looked to Brack. "How fast can you carry a full relay unit?" The Ursari grunted. "Faster if it's on fire." Leon smirked. "Then let's make it burn." They attacked just as the sun reached its peak. The Parnassi techs launched signal jammers, while Callan fired flares across the relay's perimeter. In the chaos, Leon and Brack charged through a breach in the net, stun rifles blazing. They didn't fight to destroy, they fought to confuse. Flashbangs lit the air. Shouts echoed. By the time the Delcari responded, Squad 9 was already retreating, dragging the relay's core unit with them. When they returned to the cistern, Etho nearly dropped his tools in shock. "That's a Class 4 Delcari combat uplink, Brack." Slumped against a wall. "Feels like it too." Leon leaned on the metal crate. "Can we reprogram it?" Etho's fingers were already working the interface. "Give me 6 hours and enough power cells, and I'll make it sing in human standard." By nightfall, it did more than sing. The unit flooded the enemy's private channels with misinformation, false rally points, fake casualty reports, and, most brilliantly, recordings of Koljun's voice commanding retreats he never gave. Within 2 days, half the Delkari forces were chasing ghosts in the southern canyons. The other half began falling into ambushes of their own making. Callan, perched high in the northern ridge, reported it first. "They're in disarray. I've seen 5 of their patrols fire on each other in the last 12 hours. Threxen watched. The same footage from the control center aboard the Academy station. His jaw tightened as he observed Koljun fume and curse at another failed rendezvous, his forces now operating at half cohesion. "You should shut it down," his adjutant offered. "This scenario's long past controlled parameters." "No." Threxen growled. "Let it continue. Let everyone see where this ends." Back on the ground, morale among Squad 9 soared. The alien cadets, once skeptical, now followed Leon without hesitation. Even the silent Akari nodded in rare approval. Brack, ever the cynic, began to speak of the cadet not as a lunatic, but as a leader. "You're not like the others from your world," the Ursari said one morning, watching Leon scratch new strategy lines into the dirt. "The ones in the stories, savage, blood-hungry, reckless." Leon didn't look up. "Stories only tell what people want to believe." Brack grunted. "What should I believe?" Leon paused. "Believe that Earth taught me one thing above. All never fight fair when survival's on the line." They knew Koljun would make one last move. Desperate commanders always did. The stolen uplink revealed it in clipped, static-laced orders. A concentrated assault, all remaining units, one last push to take base theta and end the simulation. Leon stared at the relayed data, silent for a long moment. "We're done playing defense," he said finally. "Let them come home to find it gone." Brack's brow furrowed. "You're not suggesting—" Leon looked up. "We hit their command base tonight." Around the room, cadets went still. It was insane. It was outside the scope of the simulation. And it was exactly what they needed to do. Leon leaned over the uplink and highlighted a narrow canyon pass near the enemy command post. "We go in light. Fast. Hit the generator and comms. If we take out their nerve center, this whole exercise ends on our terms." Callan gave a slow nod. "That's not just defiance. That's doctrine breaking." Leon stood. "So let's break it." The squad moved out under the cover of darkness. Ahead lay the enemy's final stronghold, well defended, monitored, and surrounded by Delkari-trained sentries. Leon checked his gear, then his watch. Time was short. But he felt the rhythm now, like a song only he could hear. Chaos, pressure, momentum. They weren't supposed to win, and that's what made the idea irresistible. The simulation had become real, not in blood or casualties, but in stakes, in defiance. In proving that what made humanity terrifying wasn't its technology, its numbers, or its history of violence. It was that when the galaxy told a human to surrender, they got up, smiled, and said, "Not today." The desert winds howled across the canyon walls as Squad 9 advanced through the jagged ridgeline, their silhouettes shrouded in thermoptic mesh. Moonlight filtered weakly through dust-choked clouds, giving everything a gray, dreamlike hue. Leon Vance led the formation with practiced precision, his eyes flicking between the uplink map and the real-world terrain. Each footfall was calculated, every shadow noted. Behind him, Brack moved like a boulder given purpose, silent and dangerous, while Callan brought up the rear, scanning for scouts with his long-range optics. No one spoke. They were deep behind. Delkari lines now, threading the spine of the canyon toward Base Theta, the fortified command center from which Koljun had directed his campaign. It wasn't just a symbolic target. It was logistical, psychological, and absolute. Taking it would mean collapsing the enemy's structure completely. It would mean turning the entire simulation into a footnote of humiliation for the Delkari. Leon didn't want revenge. He wanted impact. As they crested a ridge overlooking the base, he signaled a halt and dropped prone. The terrain fell away into a basin below, where Delkari tents, communication towers, and portable bunkers pulsed with low orange lights. A trio of sentry drones circled the perimeter. 4 guards patrolled in staggered intervals. Callan crawled beside him, peering through a scope. 2 dozen troops, maybe more inside. Defense grid looks light, like they weren't expecting an attack here. They think we're still licking our wounds 3 canyons west, Leon said. That's the beauty of lies. They last longer. When people want to believe them. Brack joined them, grunting softly. Plan? We hit the generators and the main uplink tower simultaneously. Ethos prepping a blackout pulse. Once it triggers, we've got 60 seconds before backup generators kick in. That's our window. Callan looked down the slope. That's a tight 60 seconds. Leon nodded. Then we don't waste a second. They split into 2 assault teams. Leon and Callan would hit the communications tower, while Brack led the rest toward the power core. Timing would be everything. No backup. No margin for error. Leon tightened his gloves, checked the charge on his rifle, and breathed in once. Slow, measured. Then he moved. They descended like shadows, merging with the rocks and sand until the perimeter was at arm's length. Leon's mind ticked through the plan like a metronome. He saw gaps in guard rotations, knew the blind spots of the drones, had memorized the shimmer pattern of the adaptive camo netting draped over the relay. Dish! 10 seconds until blackout. He crouched beside the final embankment, Callan beside him, weapons primed. Across the basin, Brack's massive form slipped into position, crouching beside the primary power conduit. 5 seconds. Leon keyed his mic twice. Short bursts. Ethos signal. Flash. Every light in the Delcari base winked out. The drones fell. Limp, their repulsors whining before shutting down. A low, collective shout echoed from the barracks. Leon ran. He surged across open ground, weaving through crates and collapsed tents. At the tower base, he launched a grappling line, letting the auto-reel carry him halfway up. Callan covered from below, his rifle barking non-lethal rounds at panicked guards. At the top, Leon ripped the relay core from its housing, slapping a plasma overloader against the socket. The device chirped, blinking red. 30 seconds. Below, Brack was a force of nature, smashing through the final barricade into the generator room. A second blackout pulse exploded upward in a dome of silent static, frying any remaining subsystems. Chaos. Leon leapt from the tower and hit the sand in a roll. Breath knocked from his lungs. He recovered fast, swept his rifle left to right, and sprinted toward the fallback point. Callan, extraction vector. North Ridge, paths open. They regrouped in the darkness. A storm of footsteps and rapid breathing. Delcari reinforcements shouted orders in the dark behind them, but the base was in disarray. Automated defenses remained offline. Tracking systems jammed. They climbed the slope, every cadet moving in tandem, driven by raw adrenaline and trust in the madness of their leader. Only when they reached the plateau above the basin did they stop. To watch the aftermath, the once glowing base now sputtered with fractured lights. The main antenna sparked, useless. Generators belched smoke. Dozens of Delcari scrambled in confusion, tripping over one another, barking accusations. Koljun himself emerged, his uniform scorched, his face locked in disbelief. Leon felt the silence spread among his squad. They had done it. They had broken the back of the simulation's top contender, not by brute strength, but with audacity, coordination, and will. Etho, panting, clutched the portable uplink. Their broadcasting blind, their entire internal. Comsnet is looped in a failsafe. They're isolated. Brack tilted his head toward Leon. Do we withdraw? Leon hesitated. No, he said. We hold this ridge. Make them come to us. Callan blinked. That's a reversal. That's pressure, Leon replied. The cadets dug in. Over the next hours, they fortified the ridge with captured Delcari, barricades and sensor spikes. The Parnassi deployed miniature drone scouts scavenged from their first skirmishes. Every move was deliberate. Every piece of debris turned into defense. Koljun sent 2 squads up the slope. Leon repelled them both with tactics so unorthodox the Delcari commanders couldn't predict them. Redirecting sound emitters to mislead positions, using reflector panels to mimic troop movement, even rigging heat packs from rations to fake biosigns. They were cadets, but this was war now, and they were winning. The Academy's orbiting command deck had gone silent. Instructors, observers, even the adjudicators leaned forward, watching the live feeds in disbelief. Commander Threxon stood alone at the edge of the viewing platform, arms folded. What do we do? his adjutant asked softly. We wait, Threxon replied. He's not done. By the third day, Delcari morale began to fracture. Some squads refused to redeploy. Others openly questioned Koljun's decisions. Leon's squad, once considered rogue and reckless, now became the rallying point for others who had survived the early chaos. 3 alien cadets from different squads, disillusioned, scattered, found their way to the ridge. Leon took them in without hesitation. You'll follow our command structure, he said simply. No ranks, just results. They nodded. More came. By nightfall, the ridge bristled with life, and the improvised base Leon had formed became something more, a symbol of defiance, a banner for every cadet who'd once felt outmatched or overlooked. Callan sat with Leon beside the central relay, watching the horizon. They're calling it now, he said. Every channel I can tap, every whisper, they're calling this the Ghost Rebellion. Leon didn't smile. We're not ghosts. We're the ones who said no. To what? To a script written without us in mind. On the 4th morning, a transport ship descended in the distance. It bore no insignia of any simulation faction. Its hull gleamed silver in the rising light. Leon stood, rifle at his side, posture relaxed. Threxon emerged from the ship, his boots crunching on dry gravel. Behind him stood 6 evaluation officers and a dozen senior tacticians. Leon approached alone. Cadet Vance, Threxon said, his voice hard. Commander, Leon replied, you were ordered to surrender. I heard you. And instead you dismantled every layer of this scenario. You caused complete systemic failure of Delcari Command. You defied direct instruction. You instigated the largest unsanctioned factional convergence in Academy history. Leon waited. Yes, sir. A long silence followed. Then Threxon stepped closer. And you did it without losing a single cadet. Leon inclined his head. The commander's expression did not soften, but his voice lowered a register. Do you understand? What you've done? I proved a point, Leon said, one that needed proving. You'll face disciplinary review. I expected that, but you'll also receive something far more valuable. Leon raised an eyebrow. Attention, Threxon said simply, and not just from us. Behind them, the other cadets watched, in silence, and the ridgeline remained quiet, alive with hope, alive with something new. The Delcari base below flickered as a final power cell failed. Smoke drifted skyward. Leon turned, surveying the scene not as a cadet, not even as a soldier, but as something else, something the galaxy hadn't seen in a long time. A human who refused to surrender and made everyone remember why Earth was still, called a death world. Then he said just 3 words to his squad, prep for Phase 4. The air on the ridge carried a different weight now, less of tension, more of inevitability. The improvised stronghold that Leon Vance and his ragtag coalition had built hummed with a pulse that no Academy simulation could simulate. No longer a position to hold, it was a symbol, a challenge hurled at the very foundation of the Galactic Officer Academy's method of instruction. In the command tent, little more than 2 heat-shielded tarps strung between antenna mounts, Leon studied the latest tactical overlays. Enemy movements below had thinned. The Delcari were unraveling, but Koljun remained entrenched, refusing to retreat, refusing to acknowledge defeat. His last 3 attempts to retake the ridge had failed, each more desperate than the last. Leon hadn't slept in over a full cycle. His eyes were dry, his voice hoarse, and his body moved by sheer inertia, but his mind was as sharp as ever. Brack entered without ceremony, ducking beneath the tent flap with practiced ease. His armor was scuffed, 1 forearm guard missing, a fresh plasma burn streaking down his flank, but he stood tall. They're making one last push, he said without preamble. Koljun's gathering everything left. They know this is it. Leon exhaled slowly. Desperation makes people brave or stupid. Callan leaned over the makeshift map table. They'll come with heavy artillery, probably rigged their walkers with heat sinks to mask approach. We won't have more than 5 minutes warning. Then we buy ourselves time, Leon said. Time and space. He looked around at the men in the room, Brack, Callan, Itho, and 2 alien cadets, who'd defected to join them. None of them had started this as friends, but now they were brothers, made not by biology or birth but by survival, trust, and a shared refusal to bow. Leon tapped the map twice. Koljun wants spectacle. We'll give him one, but on our terms. The preparations began immediately. Every drone they had left was deployed, programmed to loop erratic movement paths to draw fire and mislead heat sensors. Plasma reflectors were placed along key sightlines to warp targeting systems. The old Delcari comms array was rigged to detonate, in a dome of interference that would blind their sensors once the battle started. Brack oversaw the defensive line, barking commands in a gravelly cadence that left no room for error. Itho calibrated the shield harmonics manually, fingers dancing across circuits with alien precision. Callan and Leon worked in tandem, coordinating squad movements and fallback routes like seasoned generals. This was no longer a simulation. This was war, and Leon felt it. The line between the fabricated and the real had blurred. Somewhere between being told to surrender and capturing an enemy base with sheer will, he had become more than a cadet. And if this was to be the end of their campaign, then it would be his ending. Not the Academy's, not Koljun's, his Anne. Hour later, the ridge began to shake. From the canyon floor, the sound came first, a low, thunderous rumble followed by the piercing whine of Delcari pulse engines. Then the figures emerged through the dust. Warwalkers, armored infantry, drones, and the hulking shadow of Koljun's command crawler. It was a procession of power, intimidation incarnate. Leon stood atop the central slope, visor down, rifle slung over one shoulder. The rest of his force arrayed behind him, not a massive army, but cohesive, determined, and ready to die if that's what it took. Brack stood to his left, Callan to his right. Itho manned the central disruptor. The others took position in the flanking trenches and behind newly reinforced barriers. "Final checks," Leon said, voice tight. "Once we fire the first shot, there's no second chance." "Was there ever?" Callan replied, flashing a grin despite the tension. "No," Leon said, "but I'd rather fall here than ever be told who I'm supposed to be." A moment passed in silence. Then a single Delcari flare arced into the sky, streaking red through the air. The enemy charged. The ridge erupted. Pulse rounds lit up the sky like meteor trails. The defenders responded with precision, drones swarming, to distract, mislead, and confuse. Brack led a forward push, ambushing the Delcari flank with brutal close-range tactics. Itho triggered the interference dome, causing the enemy comms to collapse mid-coordination. Koljun's crawler surged forward, breaking through the initial line with brute force. Leon watched its approach, heart pounding. He had expected this. He wanted it. The crawler wasn't just a machine, it was Koljun's pride made manifest, and Leon had planned its destruction from the start. "Callan," Leon barked. "Now." Callan detonated the chain charges buried beneath the crawler's projected path. The earth beneath the war engine gave way, and it dropped into a concealed ravine, just deep enough to trap its legs, just wide enough to tilt its main cannon off target. A roar of confusion echoed from the Delcari. Leon didn't hesitate. "Everyone, focus fire, bring it down." It wasn't just about firepower, it was about humiliation, about proving that arrogance and legacy meant nothing when stacked against preparation, resolve, and unbreakable intent. The crawler groaned, plating twisting and bursting. Its command antenna snapped like brittle glass. Koljun bailed out just before the primary core exploded in a column of blue flame. The shockwave rocked the ridge. Leon stumbled, caught himself, and pressed forward. The Delcari line wavered, hesitated, then broke. Scattered fire turned into retreat. The enemy, once so confident, now ran. And atop the ridge, Squad 9 held. Hours later, the battlefield smoldered. The ridge remained in their possession, littered with debris and shattered war machines. Leon walked the perimeter, too tired to speak but alert. He checked the wounded. No deaths. Again, somehow, Brack approached him at twilight. "It's over." Leon looked out over the horizon. "For them, maybe." "You think it continues?" Leon nodded slowly. "After this, there's no going back to being just a cadet. They'll want explanations. They'll want blood or banners." "Which would you give them?" Leon smiled faintly. "Neither. I'll give them the truth." As the final sun dipped below the alien ridge, Another ship descended, this time bearing the Academy's elite delegation. It wasn't Commander Threxon who emerged this time. It was Admiral Loras himself, the man who oversaw the entire intergalactic academy structure, a myth among cadets, a ghost in the simulation halls. And he came not with guards, but alone, just one man walking into a field of fire-scarred dirt and bent metal. Leon met him halfway. "You're not what I expected," Loras said quietly, his expression unreadable. "Neither was this war," Leon replied. "You disobeyed direct orders. You dismantled an entire faction. You led a group of undisciplined cadets to take on the highest-ranking students in the academy and won. How do you justify it?" "I don't justify it," Leon said. "I stand by it." Silence. Then, "And if I told you this wasn't real war?" Leon's eyes hardened. "Then you've forgotten what war really is." Laura studied him a moment longer, then nodded. "I see." He extended something, small, silver, etched with the Academy's seal. Leon took it. "You've been reassigned," Laura said, "effective immediately." "To where?" "To the Special Contingency Corps. You're off the record now. No more simulations, no more classroom hypotheticals. You want to prove humanity belongs at the table. You'll do it in the void, where no one cares what planet you're from." Leon looked down at the insignia. He didn't smile. He didn't blink. He simply nodded. "Understood." Behind him, his brothers, Brack, Callan, Itho, watched. And though their fates might diverge now, what they had built on that ridge would not fade. Because this wasn't a game. It wasn't even rebellion. It was the birth of something the galaxy had not prepared for. Not just a human cadet, a human commander, one who refused to surrender, and who captured more than just an enemy base. He captured the future.